Hey guys, today's episode is very important. It is the amazing Stephanie Reisinger, and she's an expert in perinatal and postpartum issues. I have been holding this episode so close to my heart and wanted to launch it before Mother's Day. Guys, please tune in. This will change your life. Not joking. Get a cup of coffee, start folding some laundry, go for a walk, and just let the wisdom that she brings today just sink in. So, welcome to the show, Stephanie, and I can't wait to hear what you guys think about today's episode. So, Stephanie, welcome to the Overshare. We have been buddies for quite a long time. We met, I
Yes.
think it was like almost 3 years ago. We found each other
Yeah.
online, which was so cool. We got to really bond over the fact that you and I are both postpartum therapists. And that's not something I don't meet many of us. You have such a wealth of knowledge and expertise.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show today, Stephanie.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm here for all of it. I love being able to have these conversations with you. Like you said, it's so special and unique because both of us working with moms in the perinatal period and also being believers. It's a specialized set of skills and interests that we have. And so I'm always so happy to talk with you.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been a therapist for 17 years now. I've been specializing in perinatal mental health for 6 years. And currently I'm also a clinical supervisor. So I've got a team of counselors who work under me in a separate setting. It's in a university setting. But then in my private practice, I work with the perinatal population. I speak and teach on perinatal mental health. And I'm a mom, a wife, and a follower of Jesus.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What led you to focus on this part of counseling?
My own personal experience, as is true for so many of us, I went through several years of infertility and loss. Then by the time I had my first baby, expected it to be great, which some parts of it were, and other parts of it were extremely difficult. I found myself experiencing postpartum depression and anxiety. And so once I moved through that, I realized this is really where I want to be and what I want to help moms with, and just went in feet first to learn as much as I could.
Yes. I think it's really cool. You've got such an emphasis on, so much of the newer research on the perinatal disorders as well as postpartum. And so I thought it would be just helpful. I know we know these terms, but to describe the difference in perinatal versus postpartum care.
Yeah, that's such an important thing to clarify. So perinatal means anything surrounding pregnancy and birth. So when we talk about postpartum, we're looking at birth to 12 months after birth. Some of us would argue it's a bit longer than that, but just for the terms we're using specifically about perinatal mental health, we're looking at birth to postpartum, 12 months postpartum. But perinatal can also include pregnancy. And we even throw in infertility, even if somebody has not been pregnant, because it's an experience surrounding the attempts to get pregnant, potentially fertility treatments. So a lot of that really connects, of course. And so all of that means perinatal mental health.
Yeah, nice. Okay. Well, thank you for that so much. It's good to, have the distinction of, anything surrounding pregnancy, even infertility to birth. And those experiences can be really different. A pregnant mom calls you. Some of the first concerns that you hear that kind of set off your alarm bell that maybe it's time to, have a check-in.
A lot of them are thinking they don't feel like themselves. They notice that they're not themselves. And it's been going on for longer than maybe they would have anticipated. It's easy for the first maybe few weeks or even couple of months postpartum to say, well, obviously this is different. I'm not going to feel exactly like myself. And so they can sort of explain that away. But when that's been going on for several weeks or a few months, then they finally come to a place where they're going, this is not okay. Something isn't right. I think there's also a lot more awareness more recently. So I do get a lot of moms reaching out to me and specifically saying, I have postpartum anxiety, even though nobody has diagnosed them. They recognize I am experiencing postpartum anxiety or postpartum depression. And so they'll come right out and say that. And usually when they're saying that, they're correct.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, we've got that with postpartum, but when you've got a pregnant mom that's reaching
Mm.
out to you, what symptoms is she typically reaching out to you for?
Often it's anxiety symptoms, although depression during pregnancy can be just as common. I think that there's maybe more shame around being depressed during pregnancy, and so they're less likely to reach out. I do see a lot of moms who feel they feel less shame about being anxious during pregnancy. I think because it's somewhat normalized to worry about being pregnant, about something happening to your baby, worry about birth. And so they'll reach out with a lot of anxiety symptoms.
That's a really good point that I've not thought about recently of, we normalize it's normal to be worried about your next anatomy scan or your glucose screen or to
Mhm.
be worried about, things like finances and safety while you're pregnant or, just all of the aspects of being pregnant that are honestly pretty terrifying. For me, it was just
Mhm.
even just the thought of childbirth. And you're, oh,
Yeah.
sweetie, of course, I hear me in the South. Oh, sweetie, that's okay. Everyone worries about that. I know I was really worried about tearing. Like that was kept me up at night.
Mm.
And that was met with a
Mhm.
lot of kindness and a lot of, yes, we all worry about that. You're normal. You're okay. When you just said depression, I was like, ooh, I'm going to tap into this because you're exactly right. I had so many friends that had second infertility and I
Mm.
was getting pregnant with my first child. I had so much shame about feeling any sort of depression while pregnant. And I don't know that I would have named it like that until right this moment of just, yeah, I didn't feel like I had the right to
Yeah.
say, "Hey, I'm not just anxious, I'm actually really sad," even though I really want this baby, even though I am blessed. I'm not saying any of those things aren't true, and yes, all
Of course.
children are the gift from the Lord, all that stuff, but I don't know that I could have said out loud, other than to really my husband, like, "I think I'm feeling just sad too, and some depression." So that
Mhm.
is really important. Talk a little bit about, yeah, that aspect of when you hear from a perinatal case or perinatal mom
Mhm.
that's depressed.
Mhm. There is a lot of shame around it. There are all those shoulds. I should just be happy. I should be grateful. I should be looking forward to this. And just like you were saying just now, excuse me, there's both. Most of the time, I hear from moms who are depressed. They are also looking forward to parenthood. They are also excited to meet their baby. And they're sad about the change, about the grief of losing their old life. They're sad about how their relationship is going to change, about if they have other children, they're sad about how their attention maybe will be divided with the new baby. And then for some of them, there's just the physiological experience of depression that they can't even explain. And so that I think it tends to be even more difficult when they don't have something to name necessarily. They're just, for whatever reason, their hormonal change has impacted their brain health, and they are depressed and they can't even say exactly why. So a lot of shame around that.
Yeah, and I mean it's not, I mean, so much of this, I know I say it a lot, it's not rational, it's chemical. And if what your hormones are doing when you're pregnant are this, it's a lot of times it's a simple algebraic equation of A plus B equals
Mm,
C. Of if the right chemistry is there, it might not be you. It definitely
yeah.
might be just chemical. And that it's really normal. It's really
Mhm.
normal. And just because something's normal doesn't mean we don't deal with it or get you some help or love on you
Right.
and sometimes I just think it helps us say it out loud and have a sister in Christ or another professional, that says, me too. I've been there.
Mm,
And I also was really excited about becoming a mom. I also was really very much looking forward to meeting my baby, but I was grieving the loss of the fact that everything's about to change.
yep.
And just even, the thoughts of just my body changing and seeing stretch marks and things that were really hard. And I love that you mentioned that and bring that up because it's a good point. Any mom that is currently expecting that these feelings are not just normal, but we also want to give you, I guess I want to embolden them to reach out and
Mhm.
deal with them. There's nothing necessarily I don't want them to feel shame. I want them to feel, okay, well, it's time to talk about it.
Right. Right. And there are people willing and ready to listen and to support. And the thing is that it's normal, common. So many women experience at least some level of sadness or anxiety during pregnancy or postpartum. And so you're not alone. Moms are just not alone. But because there is still shame around it, they often feel alone because there's fear of talking about it, sharing with others.
So, how do you
hmm
treat perinatal depression?
Mm. Um, there are a few different considerations. So I come really from a holistic perspective and what we call a cognitive behavioral perspective. And so we examine the thoughts, underlying beliefs that are sort of driving thoughts and emotions and behavior. And so when I say a holistic perspective, I'm looking at how is mom sleeping? How is she feeding herself? Is she getting social connection? What is her relationship like with her partner? What is her spiritual life like? So we're looking at all of these aspects and starting there, especially in the perinatal period, because so much is happening with one's body and relationships. That we have to address these sort of basic needs and make sure those are being met before we can really tackle anything else. I always say, if you're not sleeping, there's no amount of talking to me about your thoughts that's going to do anything. So we've got to start there, and then we can get into the underlying beliefs. And so all of us operate under some sort of faulty belief system about ourselves or about the world or about God or all these things. And most of the time we don't have an awareness around it because nobody's ever taught us to address that or to be able to tap into that. And so once we start to examine that, we find things, underlying beliefs like I'm worthless or I am unlovable or God doesn't care about me. Nobody cares about me. We find these beliefs that have usually been born from difficult circumstances in one's life, and then learn that they're now impacting the way that this mom is seeing the world and seeing her experiences and engaging in her relationships. And so when we can identify those beliefs and then examine them, see, are these actually true? And, spoiler alert, no, they're typically not. And then we can hold them up against what is true. It's especially exciting when I get to work with a mom who is a believer in Jesus, because then we can look at scripture, we can look at what her beliefs are about God, and then examine her underlying core belief with that, like compare it to that. And we can see, God created you in his image. You are unbelievably worthy. You are so incredibly loved. We can look at that and start to replace those beliefs with the truth. And then for mamas who are not believers, we still are able to come to a place where we can think about what makes you a worthwhile person. If it's not what other people think of you or it's not your achievements, then what is it? And it really causes them to examine where they're finding their worth and find a place that isn't movable, like just being a human. That being a human means that you matter. And so your experiences and your emotions and all of those things matter as well.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I love that. And I love that you go, hey, let's get you some sleep. A Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We got to
Right.
get your physical needs. And you're exactly right. I'm like, girl, get some sleep. And then let's go right kind of for your worth and where it's at, because that depression challenges every aspect of our worth. I love that you're able to, I know you see Christians in your practice as well as non-Christians, but just being
hmm
able to bring in the fact that you're just a human being, and not just a human being. You are somebody worthy of love, attention, and healing. And I think
Yes.
that that's so important. And I think even as people listen right now, women can ask themselves that, where are you at? And who told you your worth? Should they be
Mm,
telling your worth? And what can you then tap into in yourself? And then what does God say about your worth? I think it's neat. It's just
right.
kind of some free podcast therapy. I know technically we can't do therapy over a podcast, but why not give some free therapy tips as well? So I love that.
For sure.
And what she's talking about here, friends, is she's talking about some of the basics of what we call cognitive behavioral therapy. And it's all about changing our thoughts and our belief systems that will eventually change our behavior and the way we feel about our life and about our future. It's one of the cornerstones of therapy, and it cannot be overemphasized how important it is. It's also extremely biblical,
Mm,
over the top biblical. The way that we
right.
think and believe about ourselves is very, very powerful when it comes to how we're going to feel when we wake up the next morning. And so I
Ugh.
love that when, as a clinician, as you get a mom in the office, you're addressing the sleep, the physical first, and then diving right into what is your worth, and going from there is really, really powerful. And I encourage anybody
Mhm.
listening to do the same. I know if you're driving with your kids, you might feel a little overwhelming just to do a self therapy session right now, but I encourage anyone listening to do so. So I really appreciate that tip. And I love
Mhm.
that you go there. And I
Mhm.
think that, I don't know, I feel like when we're pregnant or postpartum, even as a therapist, I forget the person sitting in front of me. And it's like we think
Mm.
so much about the pregnancy or the
Mm.
baby or the mom, and we forget just the person. And
Yeah.
let me, if I can explain that a little bit, it's just, I felt like nothing became about me anymore after I was pregnant. It was just about, how are you feeling? How many weeks? It wasn't like, how are you, Rachel? Or
Yeah.
how are you,
Mhm.
Stephanie? And so I think that's what's really cool here is, even as lay ministers, even as just friends and family, we can do that. That's ethical to say, how are you? You don't have to be licensed to go down that road. And how much we should be asking those questions within our social circles, within our churches, and our friends and our family, just being able to say, how are you? And tapping into, you still value. It's not just about, which, I mean, it's an extraordinary thing to become a mom, but we see you too. And I think that that's
Mhm.
really important what you're saying. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. We spend so much time and energy on asking, like, what's your theme for the room? What kind of stroller are you going to get? Or, what cute outfits we have picked out for the baby versus how are you doing, mama? How is this experience for you? And you're absolutely right. I think that's what a lot of moms are going through is that once she's pregnant and she's sharing with others, most of the questions are about the baby and things related to the baby and not how you are personally. And that just sort of starts the ball rolling in that direction of how I feel and who I am doesn't matter as much as the baby.
Yeah. That's the intro to my book, which is, 17 questions. And I'm laying there after I had my first baby and I had my phone, and I'm scrolling through the text messages, and it took 17 people to ask me
Mm,
how I was doing and how big
man.
is he? And I'm sitting there, and I had a bad reaction to anesthesia. So I was shaking for 30 minutes. I couldn't hold my son. And so I'm freaking out thinking he's never going to bond with me. Like the whole, I mean, obviously I just given birth, and it took 17 people to say, how are you doing, Rachel? Often it's like, oh, the baby. And look, the baby's important. Spoiler alert, of
Yeah.
course. But, moms, you matter too, quite a bit here. And that's a lot of what our practices are about, we're about the baby. We're also about mom and her health and her feeling like what she's going through matters. And
Hmm.
yeah, so I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Hmm.
So I love that you do the perinatal side and that you're bringing, just again, we need a bigger and bigger spotlight to that. I did have a question that I wasn't planning on asking you, but I'm going to ask you.
Sure.
When you have a mom that had some perinatal depression or anxiety and she gets pregnant for a second time, is she more
Mm.
likely to experience that perinatal depression or anxiety with her second pregnancy?
Statistically speaking, yes. She is more likely to experience it with a subsequent pregnancy. However, there's like a big however, is for moms who have already been treated after the first pregnancy, they're so much more resourced for the second pregnancy. They're so much more equipped to know how to recognize signs and symptoms, how to support themselves, how to set themselves up for success, that I constantly encouraging those moms, let's remember what you already know and what you've already done now. And I've seen in my practice that moms in second or third or however many pregnancies who have experienced postpartum depression or anxiety before, when they have those skills, they're less likely to experience it, at least to the same extent that they did the first time around.
Isn't that wild? And I think this couch behind me, I know, yeah, I think you might a lot of times podcast in your therapy office as well, but isn't it
Mhm.
wild to watch a mom not fall into that statistic, but actually, I don't want to say we can prevent postpartum and perinatal depression and anxiety, but we kind of can. And it's
Mhm.
wild to go into it expectant of just like, all right, we're going to dive right in. I feel as though I was able to, with my second pregnancy, prevent so much of what was so hard because I was
Yeah.
ready and I had a therapist and I knew about my medication and what was going to work after I gave birth.
Yep.
I knew what to do if breastfeeding wasn't working. Like I was resourced. And I want to like
Mhm.
instill a little bit of hope. So many moms are so scared the second time around or the third time around and thinking, oh, it's going to be just the same. And clinically, let me rephrase that. Just from the basic science of it, the moment your children are born, they're different. I have two boys, and the
Mhm.
moment that they open their eyes, they're different. And just as our children are different, our experiences are going to be different. I hear women
Yeah.
often reach out and say, well, kind of feeling doomed that since they
Mm.
experienced some depression or anxiety with one pregnancy or birth, that it's going to be that or that much worse because of that 88% study. I appreciate those numbers and they put us on guard as clinicians, but I wanted to get your opinion on that because, yeah, but we are seeing the tide turning in the fact that
Yes.
I love doing preventative care. I love it, love it, love it.
Mhm.
It makes
Oh
me,
my goodness.
right, so much joy.
Yes. Yes, it's so exciting. I love when moms come in while they're pregnant and they're doing pretty okay, but they say, "Hey, I really recognize that there's a risk for postpartum depression or anxiety, and I want to do what I can to safeguard against that." That is so thrilling to have the opportunity to do that, or for those who experienced it before and now they know they want to do things differently the second time around. It is awesome. And, like you're saying, that we can't guarantee prevention. Certainly, there are things that can go sideways that you just couldn't even expect. But more often than not, what I see is moms who feel much more capable and connected and are able to better operate and function because they have gotten all of these safeguards in place.
Hmm. Oh, well, thank you for that. It's just a nice,
Mhm.
hopeful reminder. We're not all doomed. And it's not all like, oh, okay, because it was this way the first time, it's going to be this way again. And that
Yeah.
there's work you can do. I love hearing from moms that read my book before they have the baby. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
it makes me so happy because what I would have given to go back if I could have done that work ahead of time. And actually, and I'm never downing any therapist, but my therapist at the time when I was pregnant with my first son said, well, it sounds like we need to take a break for a little while, but kind of like you're pregnant, and she wasn't a mom and she's wonderful, but she kind of said, it sounds like we need to take a break because, you need to worry about being pregnant right now. And I was like, I remember kind
Ah!
of, yeah, thank you. I was like, and she was a great lady. And there was such little awareness back then. There was
Mhm.
nothing. There wasn't a postpartum book. There were no
Mm.
blogs talking about. I mean, it's wild the difference if we think about 15
Yeah.
years ago. And I think back, I don't know that it would have changed and prevented my postpartum. No, actually, I know it would not. But I think it would have put some things in place that would have had me more ready. Because I remember
Right.
thinking, okay, wow, I felt kind of like I'm not allowed to be depressed right now. And I was
Mhm.
very early on. And I kind of thought, well, maybe she's right. I've got so much going on. I did have some morning sickness, and that might have been where she was coming from. But that's such a different, I can't imagine any therapist saying that now of just, yeah, take a break when you have morning sickness. But this is still a good time. We always take care of our vehicles. Like we have oil changes. It's a good time to come in and check in about your postpartum plan, about how will you know if you don't feel quite right? What thoughts will tell you that you're not quite yourself? And to come up, I've had clients that maybe come in once or twice while they're pregnant. And I just feel like it's
Mm.
night and day of let's prepare ahead of time. And that's so much of the work that you do. And it's so cool. So your response was very validating because I remember sitting there thinking, well, maybe, I was a newer therapist. I was like, well, maybe she's right. Maybe this is not the time for counseling. Can you speak to that of what your opinion is? Because you're the perinatal expert for sure.
Well, I advocate for counseling being part of prenatal care. So I think that every mom, while pregnant, should at least have 3 or 4 sessions with a counselor just to get set up for success. Again, to assess for where she's at, to see what potentially could be adjusted, and then make a postpartum plan. Because you can hire a doula to help with a postpartum plan. That is something that a lot of doulas will do. That's also a lot of money. If you're not planning on having a doula, it's less likely that you will have that sort of comprehensive plan. Now, I know you have one in your book, which I love so, so much, that you help moms get set up for success in that way. But even to have that professional just do some assessment, see where you're at. I think that is really should be a regular part of our prenatal care.
My goodness. You're so right. And the investment that would be 3 or 4 sessions, the prevention you could do. And I appreciate the midwives, the doulas. They know so
Mhm.
much that I don't know. But also kind of I stay in my lane. I'm not going to show up and try to birth somebody's baby. This is all we do. Right. Thank God for that. This is all we do is see mental health, and we have premarital counseling. And I always see couples for 6 sessions before they get married. My goodness, doing preventative care and just saying, hey, when we get, sorry for my car analogies, but when we get a vehicle, it's nice, to say, hey, this is how we take care of it. And if you think the investment of some sessions, which a lot of times are covered by your insurance, before
Mhm.
you have a baby, goodness gracious, just talking through what is that going to be like for you if breastfeeding is harder than we thought?
Yes.
Tell me your family history and have someone that comes up with a clinical, which I love my plan, but to have a counselor do that plan, it's going to be really valuable. Wow. Yeah. I think I'm going to
Mm.
shout that from the rooftops. Just heads up.
Hooray.
And, Stephanie and I, we're counselors and we appreciate the sessions, but we don't say that for ourselves. We're not saying that to try
Mm.
to sell you guys on something. Like I always
No
say,
way.
if you buy my book, great, but I am not here for that. That's not the goal. Is I want women to not be sad I don't want women to be as sad as I was. And
Mm.
I want women to have hope. And I know for a fact, because I've known Stephanie a long time and I know her heart, she's not saying that, ooh, let me book some sessions. She's saying that because she doesn't want you to hurt. That's so
Yeah,
cool. So thank you. Yeah, that should become standard of care. I don't really know why it's not.
totally agree. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to definitely highlight that. And so I appreciate that so much.
My
Okay.
pleasure.
So I know, obviously, I could talk to you all day, but one of the things I have always admired about you is how much you know about treating postpartum anxiety. And I know that we treat
Mm.
them together, but they're different. They act
Yeah.
different. I had more the depressed side. And so I wanted you to speak a little bit to when you see a new mom, like say you've never seen her before, she comes in with postpartum anxiety. Has somebody usually sent her to come in? Has her husband, has her friend, her
Mm.
mom said you need to see a counselor? Or has she sought that care herself?
It could be either or. There are lots of times where somebody in the family or somebody close to the mom has expressed concern and encouraged her to go to counseling. And then there are other times where she recognizes what she's experiencing is far too stressful or scary, and she reaches out for counseling.
Yeah. And I know we know those symptoms, I would love to list them and highlight them on here.
Mhm.
So women are like, okay, anxiety, because a lot of people don't really even know how to define anxiety a lot of times. Tell me what those symptoms look like.
Right. So anxiety in and of itself is things like excessive worry. There may be some physiological symptoms like tightness in the chest or shortness of breath, difficulty sleeping, and then postpartum anxiety has some very specific kinds of features. One of the really big ones is intrusive thoughts. And so intrusive thoughts being these thoughts that are about harm coming to baby or to oneself or another loved one. Sometimes the thoughts are even about mom causing harm to baby, which can feel like a very scary thought. And all of these thoughts are not thoughts that she does not want these things to happen. They are intrusive. That's why we call them intrusive thoughts. They just sort of fly into her brain and scare the heck out of her and leave her feeling anxious for the day. And so these intrusive thoughts are actually pretty common for moms to experience postpartum. But when we have postpartum anxiety, they're happening numerous times, multiple times a day, many multiples of times a day, and can feel overwhelming and scary, and can be, really just awful things like, what if I drop the baby down the stairs? Or
Hmm.
what if the baby drowned while giving the baby a bath? Those kinds of things. And so they can just be so, so distressing. And so that's a really big one we see with postpartum anxiety. And then another is just feeling really tired but wired. And so always exhausted but unable to sleep or unable to rest, especially when baby's sleeping. So not being able to, say, get a nap during the day or laying awake at night, just waiting for baby to wake up or worrying about things. And those tend to be the two most distressing experiences about postpartum anxiety.
Hmm. I love that though. And again, naming intrusive thoughts is so powerful. There's a reason there's a whole chapter in my book to it, because I'm like, okay, guys, let's walk through these. And I always like to highlight the fact that a thought upsets you probably means you're not going to do it on purpose. And
Yes,
so,
yes.
and look, we obviously we have to take any thoughts that of self-harm or harm coming to baby very seriously, and we do. However, we are responsible for about 5% of our thoughts. And I take so
Mm.
much comfort in that. And I joke that I would have punched a lot of people if everything I thought was something I was going to do. So 5% of
Right.
our thoughts are things we want to think. And we estimate you have 126,000 thoughts a day. Women have far more than men, which
Mm.
is very interesting. No wonder we're anxious.
It
And
is.
so, if you think we're responsible for 5% of them, I take a lot of comfort in that. I say that to myself almost daily of just, okay, that was a weird thought. That was a little intrusive.
Mhm.
But those, after I had my first son, were on a loop, TikTok that would never stop,
Yes.
that you don't want to watch. And I couldn't exit out of it. I couldn't kill the app. I couldn't turn my phone off. And it
Yeah.
was so painful. And I had no idea what they were. And I was a counselor, Stephanie. I should have known,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
I
me
had no
too.
idea.
Me too.
Right.
Mhm. Yeah, same.
And it's like you would think we would have logically been able to walk through that. But Stephanie and I were saying experienced clinicians didn't know it. I mean, we had to have somebody else come in and say, sweetheart, friend, let's name this, and then we'll know exactly how to deal with it. So I love you're breaking this down of tired but wired, which I can speak to that
Mhm.
as well. I know I've had so many moms, more than I can count, they can't sleep because they can't stop watching their baby breathing, the chest rise
Oh,
and fall.
yes.
And it turns into almost kind of a postpartum OCD, and
Mhm.
which is I knew that's a new era of study at this point, but we know how to treat postpartum and we know how to treat OCD. So we know how to do this. And so I see the tired and wired all the time. All the time. I haven't had coffee
Yeah.
in months, Rachel, yet I can't sleep because I am so fixated on these things or the intrusive thoughts. It's a hamster wheel. You cannot get them to slow down.
Mhm.
It's the worst. It's literally the worst. So
Mhm.
I love that you give those, because those are the two main reasons that we get those phone calls. And so when we think about, we have women listening that are not moms. We have women listening that are moms with older children or friends of moms. It's let's look out for these things also in ourselves, but in other women around us, and being able to say, hey, let's look out for these things when it comes to, hey, it's time to check in with your counselor or to check in with somebody like Stephanie or somebody like myself. Just be able to say, let's look for this stuff because it shouldn't be keeping you up at night. Because tired but
Right.
wired, and I'll let you speak to that, has to be one of the most alarming and dangerous things in the postpartum healing.
It is like torture. Like, the reason that sleep deprivation is used literally for torture is because it is so horribly horribly horrible. And so being so exhausted, knowing you need sleep, but being unable to sleep is just the absolute worst. And it exacerbates the anxiety. It increases the intrusive thoughts. And so these poor mamas just find themselves in this loop of exhaustion and scary thoughts all day
Yeah.
long.
And I'll be bold. And again, I stay in my lane. I'm not a psychiatrist, but I do, I did tons of work in psychopharmacology. When I've got someone in a pretty extreme version of tired but wired, I feel like meds are a must. I'm never going to tell someone like, oh, you have to. I'm not going to diagnose. I'm not going to tell you what meds to take. That's not my job. But that is
Right.
let's call your doctor today. Like let's get this dealt with, because at that point the nervous system is so overactivated that we do a lot of times need a biological component to slow it down, and that is okay. Sometimes
Yes.
you need something like a rescue med to slow everything down so that we can get off that hamster wheel.
Yes. It's always about risk versus benefit, and the risk of anxiety at that level being untreated is now also postpartum depression. So many moms start out anxious and then end up depressed as well because the anxiety is so distressing. And so, yeah, it's a lot of mamas I know can be nervous about taking medication postpartum, especially if they're breastfeeding. But there are medications that are safe for that and have had plenty of research and testing done. And so, yes, there is definitely a time for medication to even act as a bridge. That's how I frame it for moms a lot. Let's let this be a bridge to get you from where you are now to the place where you actually can function well enough to start to put into place the things that are going to help you in the long term. Doesn't mean you have to take medication forever, but for now, this is going to help you get to where you want to go.
It's just so good to remember we've got so much hope, so much science, so much faith, but that ladies, and I say this knowing that God can heal all things, but you don't just pray this away, okay? And look, God can heal cancer. He can heal anything, but God has also given us science. And I talk a lot about how when Jesus healed the blind man, he didn't need the mud. He just used the mud. And what if medication is the mud for you? And I know it's always weird to talk about this like spit salve that he used on this guy's eyes. But he didn't need the mud. He was Jesus, and he is Jesus. And so I love being able to think of it as a bridge. It's also not a permanent bridge. I went on meds and then didn't have to be on them forever. There's also no shame in being on meds, but there are medications that sometimes when that cycle of intrusive thoughts or the wired but tired, when it's that severe, we have to get you some rest. And a lot of times we have to have some medication that will calm the nervous system down at that point, because sure, at an 8, it's hard to de-escalate. It really is. Once that hamster wheel is just going so fast that you're spinning, a lot of times we do need some medication, and that's what it's there for.
Yep.
So I love that reminder, and I just appreciate all your wisdom here. So obviously, again, I could talk to you all day. I mean, I think I'm going to maybe in a few months ask to maybe have you back on the show. But
Great.
I would love, you've got such a wealth of wisdom, such a wealth of knowledge. Tell people where they can find you and a little bit about how they can connect with you, because the people listening to this, they're going to want to.
So easiest place to find me on Instagram, Stephanie.Reisinger. At Stephanie.Reisinger. I also have a podcast, Motherhood in America, and you can find that on Spotify and YouTube. And then my website is hopefulandwhole.com. I know that's a lot of different words. We're working on that. So my private practice is Hopeful and Whole. And so my website is hopefulandwhole.com. And you can find information about counseling services, but also about my speaking services. Like I said at the beginning, I do a lot of education and speaking in this arena. And so I speak at conferences about perinatal mental health and perinatal grief and loss, and also speak at churches or other Christian organizations to mamas who just need some support in either one or both of those arenas.
Yeah. Okay. That is fantastic. Well,
Okay.
Thank you, Stephanie, so much for being here today. Is there anything else you would like, just something that's in your mind that you'd love to share with either a pregnant mom or a mom that is about to have a baby or has had a baby? Is there anything else you would like to share today, a little tidbit?
Most important message always for mamas is that you are not alone. You are not alone. You are not the only one who is going through a hard time. And there are other women, there are counselors, and more than anything, Jesus is with you. You are never, ever alone. And I promise if you reach out, you will find others to connect with.